The Startup Cabin podcast is brought to you by Cedarwood. Cedarwood rents out senior CFOs to the tech industry from 1 to 5 days a week. For more, go to cedarwood.co. Welcome to the Startup Cabin podcast. I am Steve Ferris, and we have great stories from European startups. And in this episode, Xue Mei will talk with the founders of Tink, a personal finance app in Sweden. Tink has made financial data attractive and easy to understand. They are growing fast, and now the banks that were reluctant to collaborate with them are now knocking on their door, wanting to help make Tink even better. We're going to hear about building a team, the PR channel that gave them 10,000 signups, their thoughts behind the design of their app, and how the bank industry is changing. So let's get into it. I'll meet back with you at the end.
Okay, welcome to Startup Cabin podcast, Daniel and Frederick.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So tell us about your company.
So Tink is a standalone personal finance app to which you connect your regular bank. And we then aggregate data from all your banks. It could be credit cards, online brokers as well. And we currently support roughly the top 30 banks in Sweden. So you authorize Tink to aggregate data on your behalf. So we collect data for you typically once per day. So the Tink account is always up to date. And we aggregate the data to your Tink account in the Tink app. We then clean up transaction descriptions. We automatically categorize almost all transactions. And we just try to present a holistic, understandable view of your finances, especially for people who maybe think it's boring, complicated, time-consuming to sort out their finances. So Tink is the app for them.
Cool. And it's not very common that people actually measure their personal finances, right?
No, I mean, for a very long time, if you look at your bank account, there's always been a dumb list of transactions.
Yes.
And just a mix of, you bought something for 10 kronor and a super big mortgage, and it's all been bundled together. Almost impossible to get something understandable out of it. And that is basically the problem that we try to solve.
Cool. And Daniel Kjellén, right?
Yes.
And you're the CEO, and Fredrik Hedberg, you're the CTO?
Right.
So how do you two meet?
Well,
it sounds like a dating question when I ask it, but I just have to ask it.
It was actually quite like a date.
Okay.
Seriously. The thing was that right around the time when I moved back from the States to Sweden, I was kind of interested in doing something on my own again.
Mm.
And I was kind of back and forth and looking at different things. And then I have one of my closest friends, Niklas, who is a very dear friend of Daniel as well. But we haven't met before because we always lived in different cities or countries.
Mm.
But Niklas knew that Daniel was kind of in the same mindset, that he was kind of bored with his current job and was thinking about doing something of his own again. So he basically paired up the two of us, or the three of us. And
Oh,
said,
it wasn't like a blind date.
No, it wasn't like he was there. He was a chaperone, or
Chaperone.
whatever the word is.
So I had heard great things about Fredrik for a number of years, but as you said, we've never been in the same city, so we never met before, and now we were. So Niklas set us up for a very nice, I wouldn't say romantic, but dinner. So the three of us actually had dinners to talk about potential ideas or maybe doing something together. It wasn't very specific at the time.
And what did you do before?
So my background is mostly software. So I've been programming since I was a kid and really love it. And been both professionally and kind of on a hobby level, been very interested in software and been doing open source stuff and working for IT companies both here in Europe and in the US. but right before we started Tink, or when I met Daniel, I was actually in San Francisco working for an investment company. So totally non-tech, but very interesting.
It must have been
but
a good experience, though.
Very much. I mean, it was great, at least for me personally, to see something else. Being kind of a very kind of geeky guy, I'm very interested in software, so it was brilliant for me to get to know the other side of the table a bit. And it's hard to kind of get that sort of experience in Sweden, I think, because I mean everything is on a different level, so to speak, in the US.
And you worked in venture capital?
No, so I mean, my background, I founded a company back in 2001 that did corporate domain name management, and that was acquired in 2008. And then I joined an investment bank in Stockholm. So I worked there for 4 years before quitting to found Tink together with Fredrik. But that first dinner, what happened afterwards was that because you lived in Skåne at the time, and we started to commute every second week or every second weekend, and just brainstorm about ideas and test out new concept and so on.
Which is really, I mean, in retrospect, a bizarre situation where two guys not totally behind, what's the word? Totally behind. And we're like thinking, okay, we can do whatever we want in the entire world. And like coming up with that perfect idea, I mean, it's impossible, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, in the end, I think we landed in something that was kind of in the cross section between tech and finance, which was really our backgrounds.
Yeah.
And I mean, essentially, it was kind of the same thing we're doing today. So it hasn't really changed too much. But
I think also at the time that back then we thought that the idea was everything, and we now come to understand that the team is everything, and the operations is everything, and the execution is everything.
And sales.
Yeah, sales. Yes.
Acquiring users.
Absolutely.
Cool. And you actually had a pretty cool like intro with your app. You got 50,000 registered users in the first week, which is pretty much unheard of in Sweden, right?
I mean, we were super happy, but I think we should rewind 4 months, because that was a time when we launched invite-only web version of Tink that not many people have heard of. It was a very nice...
And that was 4 months before.
Yes.
Yes.
So that was a nice tool where you could slice and dice and drill down yourself to do financial analysis, and it was web-based. And we had about 10 signups a day, and we had 6 months left of money. So we understood we have to do something that's drastically different. And the problem, I think, was that the potential audience for a tool where you do things yourself when it comes to finances is very small, because you have to be a bit finance geeky.
Yeah. And a lot of people are actually pretty afraid to do it, you know, the right way or the wrong way. They don't really want to know the numbers, so they stop doing it.
Yes, definitely.
It's too big of a leap.
And also, if you have a desktop product, we are competing with your time when you could spend time with your kids or watching TV at home at night. Whereas if you are on the mobile, then we could hit you when you have your 2 most boring minutes a day. Could be waiting for the bus or so. So we decided we need to flip everything around from what we have today to make the product entirely mobile. The entire use case should be mobile. And that meant that instead of you going in and do the analysis, we do it for you. So for every new transaction that comes into Tink, we run thousands of calculations, and maybe one of those will end up in Tink, like an insight in the Tink feed, for example. We need to automate everything. Instead of you categorizing, we need to do it for you. And I think that was a game changer. So then we launched in September again, or did our full launch, and everything was different.
And then you launched with the mobile app.
Yes, only. We didn't even say that we had a web version.
I mean, that was really, as Dan was saying, that was really kind of the inflection point in Tink. I think it's pretty symptomatic for a lot of companies in our space that it's usually two guys, kind of finance geeky, very interested in kind of keeping track and stuff like that, like ourselves. And they built this amazing tool to replace their Excel sheets where they do their budgets, right? And I mean, before we launched our product in Sweden, probably been like 10 similar ventures before. And all of them was very much alike our first web app, right? But then, as I said, we really came to the realization that this is the 5% of us that are interested in this.
And I heard from Sander working with you that that's more kind of your power users that use it.
Right. I mean, we have a ton of those as well.
Yeah.
And we love them.
We love them, and we try to cater to their utmost like kind of power user use case. But it's hard to solve everyone's kind of very detailed or specific problem all the time. So we really try to focus on kind of our core demographic or kind of the 80% rather than the 20%.
And this, like the web version, you still had 10 signups a day pretty much.
Yeah.
How long did you have that up for? Was it for 4 months or?
Something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
And what was the kind of strategy for getting those users compared to what you did with the mobile version later?
So it wasn't invite only. We wanted to create the hype, which never happened.
With the web version?
Exactly. And then I think it was more of a traditional full-blown launch not with very much money though, but still we had a PR agency and so on. I think we really hoped to get a lot of press at launch, and we talked to a number of newspapers, and it was only Dagens Industri who was interested. And to launch a mobile app for the 30-something consumer-orientated in Dagens Industri, I mean, that wouldn't be your first choice. But they were the only newspaper who wrote about us, and it was because they could have Niklas Storåkers, our chairman, on a big picture.
And he is a pretty known businessman here in
yes,
Sweden.
former bank CEO.
Yes.
So nothing happened for a few days, and then we started to get really good reviews. So maybe we had 1,000 downloads the first day, and then 2,000 the next day, and it just escalated. And when the press saw that we were climbing the App Store charts, they understood we need to write about it, and they tested it themselves, and then it was all going on.
Did you tell them about this? I mean, when you were starting to climb, did you tell them about it, or were they already kind of, checking the app out and see what was going on the first week? Or
I think it kind of happened simultaneously, but we tried definitely to push messages when we overtook Instagram on top 15, for example, on the app chart.
Okay, so it was actually more of the magical, let's go viral. It wasn't that much of a strategy.
Unfortunately not. I think that, I mean...
What did we do right? Don't know.
No, but I mean, it would be so much better if we had a brilliant PR strategy that could be used for a number of other countries. I think that for us and for a lot of consumer apps, you cannot rely on PR. You can rely on a very good product that people recommend to your friends. And I think that we had a very good product at the time and now as well. And I think that was the game changer for us.
Did you upload it to any kind of startup list, like beta list or something like that?
No, not really. I mean, and that's also... No, we didn't. And I think, we were kind of naive when we started this out, which is, I think, a really good kind of property to have sometimes. But, it's kind of fun because neither one of me or Daniel, of course, but not a single person in the team had actually built an app before. This was kind of new territory for us.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. We had I guess Product Hunt hadn't launched by then, or maybe they had, but I don't know. But we weren't really aware of kind of what you were supposed to do, right? This was kind of our first, both me and Daniel had been into kind of more the B2B business before, but this was our first venture into kind of the app ecosystem and B2C. So we were, to be frank, kind of aware of what you were supposed to do.
Okay.
And I mean, looking at the Sandra, who's head of marketing, who used to work at the treasury department at Atlas Copco before, and me and Fredrik came from the finance side. Andreas, who did the categorization system at Tink, he's a nuclear scientist. and the other Fredrik, who actually built the entire app over the summer, he had never built apps before professionally. It was just but that also, I mean,
That's kind of insane.
yes, it is insane.
You should have that on your website. This is the team.
Yes, but it's I mean, we really try to hire based on everything but your previous experience. We just want brilliant people with the right mindset, and
We're passionate. And...
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think that's definitely the number one, if any, or so far, kind of reason for our success is that we've managed to lure amazing people with totally different experiences and background and so on into the team. I think that has really paid off, because building a product such as ours is not primarily about can we design nice charts and can we kind of build a cool app or something, but it's so much more. It's about kind of figuring out the use cases, really figuring out the use cases. Kind of the back end side of things is extremely complex. I mean, it's very, very sophisticated kind of machine learning models to process all this data and so on. So it's not really kind of the classical competence you need for building just a slick app. I mean, it's so much more that's required. So I think that's definitely the number one reason for the success we've had so far.
And we always wanted to be the app to be like the tip of the iceberg. So 10% is what you see in the actual app, and 90% should be the back end, and that's pretty much how we devote our time as well.
And I mean, I've been talking to a lot of startups about, this is a time for curation. People don't want to do, as you said, they don't want to do this themselves. They don't want to do their own Spotify list. They don't want to do, they don't want to find and search. Searching is kind of over. They want just, cool people to curate things for them and like be smarter than themselves so they can learn. And I mean, that's what we see now. It's mostly apps that teach you something in the process. You don't really know how, because as you said, it's 90% back end. But it looks nice, and you actually get something out of it without putting too much effort into it. And I think that also, is very typical for mobile. As you said, it's 2 minutes. It's not 30 minutes you spend per time in the app. So
I think that's really spot on, and I think it really resonates with the use case that we're seeing and that we wanted to hit. It's really that. I mean, our demographic is kind of in the user in his 30s, half guys, girls. But the single biggest demographic is actually a 25-year-old female. Mm-hmm. And most often you use the app kind of when you have a minute or so over, waiting on the bus or whatever. You kind of pull up your Facebook feed and you scroll through it, through your Instagram feed, and then you kind of scroll through your Tink feed and see if there's anything interesting that we have found that we think you should know. I think that's pretty spot on.
And it's also interesting that what we learned during to talk about the PR strategy at launch, when we have an article in one of the biggest papers in Sweden, maybe we get another 500 users that day.
Yes.
Basically nothing. And when the biggest female blogger in Sweden, called Blondine Bella, when she wrote about us, we had 10,000 signups in 2 days.
Actually, I actually told one of my clients just the other week about that. They were so worried, and another startup, they were so worried about, we have to get all of these, articles in big magazines, and we have to have all of these, ads in magazines. I was like, forget about it. You have to find the good bloggers. You have to find, your ambassadors. Being in magazines, that's branding. Branding, that's long term. It's not to get users the next day. So you don't have to care about that part. You can put in the ads, but the effect is not going to be until, you've done this maybe 10 or 20 times. And I think a lot of people think about PR that it's, you know, kind of overnight and there's a, you know, picture of me in the magazine and that's when we're going to get 5,000 new users. But that's not really what happens. And it's good that you say that because I want the listeners to learn this. And you have around 250,000 users now in Sweden, right?
Right.
Did you do something differently from the 50,000s to the 250,000s?
Not really. I mean, we've, as Daniel said, we've been blessed in that people really seem to like our product. We've been kind of experimenting with some like paid acquisition, like Facebook, etc. But I mean, the absolute vast majority of our users is really kind of user recommendation driven, which I mean we're extremely humbled by, but it's also pretty amazing. And if you compare us to a couple of other types of products, I mean we don't really have like any social features yet, which I mean we would love to have, but we just haven't kind of cracked the nut yet. So it's actually primarily been just that our users kind of keep talking about it.
So it's not that they share it from the app. What's the most common way of sharing it for them?
Like in person, like talking about it and showing it, or word of mouth.
We took baby steps of doing. We took baby steps of making Tink social last year when we launched a Tink selfie, which was a financial snapshot of your last year's spending. So we try to make. We let you brag a bit, but still be humble. So we saw that Fredrik had his biggest dinner at Hackathon in London, but he also went to McDonald's a whopping 49 times. So he could share that because he had a year of great dinners, because that's where the category where he stood out. And I think it would be interesting to continue to experiment along those lines and see if we could make social, or to make finances, personal finance, shareable and social.
And so how did that work? The Tink selfie.
So basically, I mean, the much of the Tink product is built around the Tink feed, which is pretty much like your Facebook feed, but about stuff that's happening in your financial life, right? And we had this, so we basically analyzed everything about your last year spending and automatically constructed this image of it. So it had a couple of interesting data points, like exactly like Daniel said. The category that stood out for me was restaurants, and I think taxi or something, which is my other.
I don't want to know
which
what
is my other,
is.
which is my other vice.
I took a taxi to work today. Yeah.
And again, it was kind of like this humble brag about kind of my most expensive thing and my most kind of sloppy thing, right? And then we pushed that into the feed with some nice graphics. I think it was like some food or something for me. And then I could share it on Facebook or Instagram or something. And people thought it was really fun, and they shared it and they commented, and people were, I think that they thought it was fun to compare yourself to others as well, right? So I think, I mean, that was kind of a fun thing. I think if you think about the more serious things, I think there's kind of really stuff you can do that could not only be fun and social, but also be very valuable. Would be interesting for me to see if I'm overpaying for my mortgage, right? If I compare myself to my peers, like other people in my neighborhood that make as much money as I do or whatever. So I think there's real potential value to be able to make, as Daniel said, personal finance more social as well.
And if you search for the hashtag Tink selfie on Instagram, you find a bunch of Tink selfies.
Cool. I saw it when it came out, and I thought it was actually a really brilliant idea, because everybody uses selfies, so they understand the concept of actually showing yourself in a snap kind of fast way. And I think I saw a couple of friends having that as well. And I mean, that's also about, as you said, it's about, you know, bragging, but also, you know, this is the bad stuff I'm doing. You have to have like both sides, because otherwise it doesn't become that balance. So I thought it was very, well thought out, actually.
All credit to Sandra.
So do you use like paid ads, etc.? You talked about Facebook ads. What's your experience with using, you know, Google AdWords or you know, social media ads?
So last year we did a month of trials, basically, where we tried to do acquisition across different channels, such as banner ads, more or less intelligent banner ads, Facebook ads, and some Google AdWords as well. And it turned out that the by far most efficient channel was Facebook. But that was only a test, so we did that for a month just to know, to gain more knowledge. We did that for about a month, and then we shut it down. And we do very, very limited Facebook ads every now and then now. But
is that the only kind of ads you use?
Yes. So we think that as long as we are fortunate enough to have the organic growth that we have, there's no real meaning in spending too much money on ads at this point.
And you got an investment. It was kind of recently, not that recently. It was about $4 million, right? And a couple of investors here, kind of known businessmen here in Sweden, and also Sunstone Capital from Denmark, right?
Right.
Why the investment, and what did you want to use it for?
Yeah, first of all, we were running out of money. So that was the first reason. I mean, why we wanted to bring Sunstone in is, I think that Christian, who is on our board, he's just great of putting things in perspective when you dig deep in operations. I think he's great at helping us to zoom out a bit, and he's really good at consumer tech as well. So we're really, really, and we can say this now a year later, we are really, really happy that we brought Sunstone along the ride. They've been very helpful. For us, it's all about trying to scale it up. I think at the time when we met Sunstone the first time, I think we had about 100,000 users. So of course we wanted to double that or triple that amount, and so we did. And the next goal is definitely to go abroad with Tink. And this is something we are working on currently.
So what's the plan for going outside of Sweden? What kind of countries are you looking at, and why?
So I think we want the European market because there aren't very many similar products there. We probably want a bigger market because it takes quite a lot of time to get our systems up and running for a new market. So you don't want to go to Denmark. So I guess that UK and France is one or two of or I think that UK and France are interesting market, both because of the size, but also because of the card usage, which is in Germany, for example, very, very low. So those are aspects as well that we have to take into consideration. But then there's also new laws coming out on the EU level, the new Payment Service Directive, that is most likely going to regulate how we aggregate data from banks, which is going to be a very, very positive thing for us to have that framework in place, both in Sweden, but also for us expanding. It's going to have a great impact on our market. But those regulations aren't finalized yet. So we think for time being, it would be unwise to launch a new market before we see...
Until that happens.
Exactly, yes.
So the new laws, is that going to even out kind of the way you can market and show your products in EU countries?
No, so the biggest difference is how that banks must open up their systems for overlay services such as Tink.
Oh.
Yes.
We like that.
So that is a big thing, of course.
But I mean, you're an app that actually shows, consumers what they spend in, the banking industry. Pretty much. I mean, that's where you are in one way or another. Those are your partners. Do you think that all these financial apps, and I mean, it's mostly startups coming from a very disruptive point of view, do you think that's going to change how the banks work?
I think that, where people have had success when competing with banks. I think it's been in niche markets, so they take like one tiny vertical at a time, which been very successful for a lot of people. I think that the big business for banks, I think it is harder to compete with than you imagine, because there is a lot of relationships and there's a lot of backend and it's a lot of regulation. So I think the way forward for us and people like us is probably to, when things open up, just grab that opportunity and take just a slice of the cake from the banks. And eventually, hopefully, that slice will be significant.
Mm. And also, I mean, that means also being prepared both financially and everything else that comes with scaling for that kind of leap to happen. Because of course you can be there, but if you don't have the money or the system that can actually take the new amount of users, it's not going to work anyway. So
I think one good example of that is for example, Venmo in the US, where banks themselves didn't provide a good peer-to-peer way of sending money. But in Sweden, the banks were there very fast, created the brilliant service Swish. So they did with Bank ID. If that didn't happen, someone else had created those services. So there are gonna be opportunities, and we'll see if the banks or the entrepreneurs are gonna be there fastest.
Yeah, and I also think that outside of Sweden, if you think about Europe, that's going to be more opportunities. As you said, the Swedish banks, they are actually the most modern in Europe. I've listened to Italian friends tell me about how you use banks in Italy, and I'm like amazed at how bad, how long everything takes and how bad the service is. And yeah, it's different with Sweden. So yeah, I can see that. So the last year, what do you see was the weirdest or hardest part about doing business? Something you learned that was just like, oh, we're never doing this again.
I mean, we really wanted to go abroad earlier, and we did beta tests in a number of countries, and I think that EU legislation on their way was just. I mean, if we could have decided ourselves, we would be abroad now. And I think it's just you have to, even if you want to be super fast as an entrepreneur and say that the reason for everyone else being slow is because they are, I don't know, boring or something. You have to realize that you also have to adopt to the landscape that you are in, and I think we've done that, and said we're gonna wait for a while. We're gonna focus on product. We're gonna focus on continue to grow our business in Sweden, and I think that has been it's been rewarding now, and it's been a learning curve and a patient game, but yeah.
Thanks so much for coming and talking to us at Startup Cabin Podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thanks.
You've been listening to the founders of Tink, Fredrik Hedberg and Daniel Kjellin. Tink is based in Stockholm, Sweden, and Startup Cabin is based in Stockholm, Sweden. And if you're a startup entrepreneur near Stockholm, we've created a meetup for you. The last Thursday of every month, you can get peer feedback, expert talks, and one-on-one time with business advisors. You can join us at meetup.com/startupcabin. There's so much happening in the European startup world. Help us get the word out by giving us a review on iTunes, like this from Ian Sturgeon. Lots of great info. Glad I found you. Great job. Thanks, Ian, and all the rest of you. Have an awesome day.